Every character in The Simpsons has committed some appalling crimes, but nobody more so than Monty Burns. We're gonna start our list with an episode where Burns literally tries to have an old man assassinated. It's Raging Abe Simpson and his grumbling grandson in The Curse of the Flying HellFish. The episode starts with Bart in full-on humiliation mode. Grandpa has decided to crash Springfield Elementary for Grandparents' Day. Of course, Abe, being the old doofus that he is, embarrasses the hell out of Bart with his wild stories. The man's going on about toilet interventions and some nonsense from the year 19-dickety-2. And Bart just wants to crawl into a hole and die. But hey, that's Abe for you. He's basically just dentures and stupid old stories. Later, Abe's back at his old folks' home when he gets this random letter that some dude named Asa Phelps kicked the bucket. Now, he's super excited about this because it means Abe's about to get a fat stack of cash thanks to some secret pact. Of course, old Mr. Burns, the wrinkly, greedy jerk, shows up at the funeral because he's part of the deal too. So here's the deal. There's a safe, a piece of paper with a bunch of names on it, and now it's just down to Abe and Burns. You can almost see Burns rubbing his hands together like the evil genius he thinks he is. Only one more person to bump off and the profit is all his. Naturally, Burns isn't about to play fair. No, he hires an assassin to off Abe. Pretty illegal, don't you think? He tries everything. Machine guns, fake Simpsons, you name it. But Abe somehow dodges every assassination attempt like he's in his prime again. He finally heads to Bart's place, not explaining jack to anyone about why Burns wants him dead. He just ignores the whole thing. After hearing the nonsense, Bart's not even surprised, just annoyed because now Abe's crashing in his room. Okay, now we have to address the big question we all have. What the hell is going on? Why does Burns want to murder this old man? Well, Abe spills the beans to Bart about his flying HellFish squad from World War II. Apparently, they found a stash of paintings in a German castle, and this shady group of misfits decided to split the loot through a tontine. Now it's just down to Abe and Burns, and things are about to get real. One has to die to get the loot, and Mr. Burns will do anything to ensure it isn't him. Burns crashes into Bart's room with a crane, snatches Abe's key, and starts laughing like a madman, because you don't need subtlety when you have a crane. But Bart's got the real key. He's a sneaky little brat. You can't fool him, so Abe and Bart take off, racing against time to get the treasure before Burns pulls another insane stunt. They get to the lake, dive for the treasure, and just when it seems they've won, Burns swoops in, steals the paintings, and dumps Bart in a crate like yesterday's trash. But Abe's not done. He saves Bart, and they chase Burns down to serve justice, not death. Abe doesn't have the energy to kill anybody. No, Abe gets his final moment, discharging Burns from the army, but the government shows up to snatch the paintings back. So Abe doesn't get the cash, but at least Bart doesn't think he's just a sad old loser anymore. Well, he doesn't think his grandpa is sad, so Burns' big assassination attempt failed pretty miserably. But don't go thinking he's lost his touch, like in American History X-Cellent. Alright, so Mr. Burns kicks off the 4th of July in the most Burns way possible, by making his entire workforce bust their asses for his own personal picnic. Because, of course, nothing says freedom like forcing your employees into slave labor. Unsurprisingly, he's completely unimpressed with their half-assed efforts, which sends Lenny, Homer, and Carl straight into the wine cellar to drown their misery. These three dumbasses get hammered and end up wrecking Burns. Off to jail he goes. And guess what? In prison, things get weird. This Green Mile wannabe dude literally sucks the evil out of Burns, eats it, and then somehow influences Burns to turn over a new leaf. It's bizarre, but suddenly Burns is all zen and reformed. Who would have thought? While Burns is locked up, Smithers takes over the nuclear plant and, surprisingly, turns out to be better at running the place than Burns ever was. But then he overhears Homer, Lenny, and Carl talking smack about him at the bar. And apparently that's all that's needed to turn Smithers into a slightly less threatening Mr. Burns. And now the trio needs to break Burns out of jail because apparently Tyrant Burns is better than Tyrant Smithers. Even though Burns doesn't want to leave prison, the three of them convince him to go back to his evil ways, disappointing the, weird Green Mile evil sucker. Burns returns to his, well, normal is relative, I guess, but slightly less unhinged. until Burns comes along and decides to turn a music venue into a prison. It's the 7-beer snitch. Alright, so the Simpsons family takes a little trip over to Shelbyville, and surprise, surprise, the fine folks of Shelbyville call everyone from Springfield a bunch of dumb hicks. Well, they're not wrong, but Marge is instantly furious. She's not having any of that. So she goes to the Springfield Cultural Advisory Board and suggests that they need a fancy cultural center to show up those Shelbyville jerks. And of course, she goes all out with her suggestion, even writing it on Snoopy stationery, you know, to show she's cultured. Somehow her Snoopy powered plan works, and they hire this big shot architect, Frank Gehry, to design the thing. The town actually approves his wacky ass design, and soon enough, they've spent $30 million on this shiny new cultural center. Only problem? No one in Springfield gives a crap about classical music. Like, they show up for Beethoven's Fifth, realize it's more than a ringtone, and bail. The center opens and then closes just like that. Enter Mr. Burns, who smells an opportunity. He swoops in and suggests turning the failed cultural center into a state prison. Yep, just lock people up where the music died. Homer naturally applies for a guard job, but fails the drug test because Otto swapped their urine samples. Otto's pee is basically a cocktail of every drug known to man, animal, and probably alien. But somehow Homer's pee is totally clear of anything sketchy. Honestly, kinda surprised by that, but okay. So Burns is losing cash on his prison because, you know, there aren't enough criminals. Wiggum comes up with this dumb plan to start arresting people for breaking ancient, ridiculous laws from some crusty old book. Burns and Quimby quickly slap on hats because apparently it's illegal to be hatless in daylight now. And Mr. Smithers gets a pass because Wiggum has some dirt on him for a crime he let slide. And you know it's something way worse than just being hatless. Anyway, Homer ends up in jail for kicking a can 5 times in a row. Illegal transport of litter, they call it. While inside, he snitches on Snake's escape plan without even realizing it. So Burns makes him the official prison snitch. Well, no urine test needed for that job, at least. Homer loves it, gets all cozy with the guards, and even scores himself a plasma TV for his trouble. But of course, Fat Tony and the boys are onto him. They find out he's the rat thanks to Marge yelling about it during visiting hours. Because why not out your husband in front of a bunch of mobsters? What a fantastic idea. Things go sideways when a riot breaks out, with everyone trying to kill Homer. Somehow it gets stopped, but in the end, Homer snitches about the prison's crappy conditions, and they release everyone onto a barge for some good old-fashioned bare-knuckle boxing. Because truly any problem can be solved by punching someone in the face until they're unconscious. Meanwhile, Homer's at the dentist with the kids, and they find out Lisa needs braces. When Marge tells Homer, he's like, "Don't worry, we've got a dental plan." But then at the union meeting, they drop the bomb. They gotta give up the dental plan for free beer at meetings. Homer, in his usual slow-brain style, finally realizes this means he'd have to pay for Lisa's braces out of pocket. He freaks out and ends up becoming union president because apparently they have no better options. Burns, of course, tries everything to bust the strike, bringing in old-timey strikebreakers, led by Grandpa no less, using a hose which backfires spectacularly, and even trying to replace the workers with killer robots. But in the end, it's a frickin' song from Lisa and the strikers that breaks Burns. He gives in to their demands, but only after making Homer quit as president. I guess music is Burns' one weakness now. Well, that and literally every vaguely physical action. With the dental plan back, Lisa gets her fancy new braces, and Homer's dumbassery saves the day. Again. Okay, so I guess he has no real way to fully break a strike of his employees, but Burns leaves his options open. Like how he once basically kidnapped Bart just so he could have a son. It's Burns' Heir. So the episode starts with Mr. Burns almost biting it in his bathtub, all because a damn sponge is too heavy for his frail, ancient body. That near-death experience makes him realize there's no one to run his precious power plant if he croaks. His genius solution? Find some local kid to be his heir. Much easier than, I don't know, training someone to do the job. Anyway, Burns holds some tryouts for the kids of Springfield, and Bart shows up to audition, but Burns ain't feeling him and kicks Bart out. literally, with a machine that boots him right in the ass. Not one to let that slide, Bart goes on a rampage, trashing Burns' place, breaking his windows, wrecking statues, and even flooding the old man's car. You know, just to really get the message across. But in true evil fashion, Burns loves Bart's rebellious streak. He's all, this kid's got the right kind of evil, and makes Bart his heir. Homer, of course, is all in, thinking they've struck gold. But Marge thinks Bart should actually, you know, spend time with Burns and get to know him properly if he's gonna inherit his fortune. So Bart moves in, and it sucks at first. Burns accidentally ties him up with some freaky chair restraints when he tries to order pizza. Which is, I just don't want to know why he has that whole thing set up. Eventually though, Bart starts to enjoy the billionaire lifestyle, where he can do whatever the hell he wants without consequence. He gets spoiled rotten and starts resenting his family's lame, normal life. I bet Burns never strangled Bart. When Bart goes back to Burns, Homer and Marge freak out and try everything to get him back as their son. They go to the cops and get the moron Lionel Hutz involved. But no luck. Probably because they went to the cops and got that moron Lionel Hutz involved. The court even says Bart's legally Burns' biological son. Which is not true, but, you know, money changes things. Desperate, Homer and Marge hire a crazy deprogrammer to snap Bart out of it. But the guy snatches up Hans Moleman instead, and Homer weirdly bonds with his new wrinkly son. Bart eventually starts feeling lonely and unsatisfied and wants to come back home. But Burns manipulates him with some shady video of actors pretending to be Bart's family, making him believe they hate him. And it works somehow. Bart's all in on being Burns' kid again. They celebrate by heading to the power plant, where they start dropping employees into trapdoors. That's why Homer and Bart never truly bonded. No murder. But then Burns tells Bart to fire Homer. Well, that's a line Bart just won't cross, and instead he turns tables and drops Burns down the trapdoor, with Smithers jumping in after him like the loyal lapdog he is, or a spineless dweeb. Take your pick. Bart finally goes back to his real family, where Marge reminds him how much the real Simpsons missed him. They all have a sappy reunion, and Homer introduces Bart to his new brother, the still brainwashed Hans Moleman. Marge demands Homer get that thing out of her house. Unusually harsh, considering Moleman is the best character in the whole show. He's also one of the characters that has been killed the most by Mr. Burns, although he's open to trying out some new targets, like in Bart Gets Hit by a Car. Turn heaven? Some mistake here. Well, it doesn't last. Bart spits off the edge of that heavenly staircase and oops, straight down to hell he goes. That's better. The devil checks Bart's file and basically says, "Nah kid, you've got like 100 years of bad behavior left before you end up here for good." So he sends Bart back up with a nice little keep sinning message. Motivation is important for sinners, so Bart wakes up in the hospital, surrounded by his family and some random guy who turns out to be Lionel Hutz, that shady lawyer extraordinaire whose clients are, apparently, the Simpsons and nobody else. Hutz smells money and hands Homer his card, but Marge says hell no to suing Mr. Burns. But Homer gets pissed when Burns offers him a measly $100 to make everything go away. Like, come on, that won't even cover the hospital bill. This is America. Homer storms off and goes right back to Hutz, ready to sue. In court, it's a circus. Bart spins the dramatic tale of being a sweet little angel who got mowed down by Burns in his car of death, while Burns acts like he's the victim, saying he was on his way to deliver toys to orphans. Probably the orphans he stole toys from. But finally Burns tries to settle, offering $500,000 to make it all go away. Homer's ready to jump, but Marge won't let him. She's fed up with the lies, the greed, and Hutz's shady tactics, so she spills the truth on the stand, completely torpedoing their case, and Homer loses his mind. So now Homer's sulking, blaming Marge for costing him the million. He even considers leaving her, which really says a lot about their relationship, doesn't it? But like always, deep down, he knows he loves her, they hug it out, and Moe buys them a beer. Lesson learned, right? Well, until the next big lawsuit rolls around, and there's no chance Mr. Burns will be taken down by a Simpson of all people. Although, let's be honest, the Simpsons have more than enough reason to kill Mr. Burns, especially when he pulls off a big Bond-level plot, like in Who Shot Mr. Burns. So the school week kicks off with Principal Skinner discovering that super dude, the 4th grade gerbil, kicked the bucket. Skinner hands the job of burying the poor thing to groundskeeper Willie. And what happens? Willie strikes oil while digging and blows the whole school to pieces. So the school's loaded now, and everyone's going wild, asking for all sorts of crap. Willie wants a crystal slop bucket and a new filthy blanket. Otto wants a double guitar, and Lisa, oh sweet Lisa, she wants to hire Tito Puente to teach jazz, because that's what these kids really need. But guess who smells the money from miles away? Old greedy-ass Mr. Burns, of course. He's like, hell no, that oil's mine. So he shows up at the school dressed as Jimbo Jones, and being all, how do you do, fellow kids? Trying to buy the drilling rights. Skinner immediately calls him out because, it turns out, you can't mistake a 104-year-old man for a punk kid. So Burns decides to steal the oil with some sneaky slant drilling. And then all hell breaks loose. First, Bart's treehouse gets obliterated by a jet of oil, leaving him injured, and Santa's little helper with busted legs. Next, Grandpa's retirement home collapses into a sinkhole. So now Abe's gotta move in with the Simpsons, dragging his loaded gun along. Moe's bar has to shut down from all the oil fumes, leaving Barney, Moe, and the barflies armed and furious. Basically, the whole town has got a reason to kill Burns. Meanwhile, the school's now broke because Burns stole all the oil, and Skinner has to fire Willie and Tito Puente. But the real kicker, Homer's had enough of Burns never remembering his name, despite having worked for him for a decade. Homer snaps, spray paints I am Homer Simpson in Burns' office, shakes him like a ragdoll, and swears he's gonna kill him. Not the greatest alibi. But then Burns takes his evil to a whole new level, deciding to block out the frickin' sun with a giant disc to force everyone to use his electricity. Now that is a jail-worthy offense. Smithers finally stands up to him, but Burns fires him. The town loses its mind, and people start packing heat. Burns shows up at a town meeting with a gun, taunts everyone, and then flips the switch on his sunblocker. Now the town's in darkness and Burns is just whistling down the street, happy as hell. But then, bam! Someone shoots him. Burns staggers onto the sundial, clutching his chest, and collapses. Everyone's shocked, but as we said, who wouldn't want to shoot Burns? And then cue the dun-dun-dun moment, because it's a cliffhanger, folks. I mean, everybody knows who did it, but if you don't, well, you might never know. Or you can just invent whatever ending you want to invent, which is another thing Burns is good at: manufacturing fake news. It was his whole plan in Fraudcast News. So Springfield's got this new national park, Geezer Rock. This big-ass rock that looks like an old dude's face. Lisa's all ready to give some deep artsy poem at the ceremony, but Homer sees a little tree growing in the eye of the rock and can't help himself. Rather than listening to his daughter's lame-ass poem, he just yanks it right out like a hero, thinking he's saving the day. But instead, the whole rock face crumbles into a pile of rubble. Geezer Rock is toast, and everyone's screaming and running for their lives. Except Mr. Burns, of course, who ends up buried under a landslide. Good riddance, right? Obviously wrong. So wrong, actually. Burns is an unkillable cockroach, slithering out of the dirt like some evil, bald, wrinkly, frail snake. The guy's barely made it out alive, and what does he do? Turns on the news to see if anyone cares that he's gone. Kent Brockman's on TV all somber, and Burns realizes, oh, they do care. He made an impact in people's lives. They love him. He could not be more wrong. They're talking about Geezer Rock, not him. Everyone's relieved he's dead, which sends Burns into a full-blown meltdown. So the guy decides, screw it, I'll just buy every damn media outlet in Springfield and make them love me. Meanwhile, Lisa's still salty that no one heard her poem. So she takes Marge's advice and publishes it in her own little paper, the Red Dress Press. Turns out people actually like it. So she ropes in Bart, Milhouse, and even Nelson to help out with the next issue. But while Lisa's out here running her wholesome little indie rag, Burns is snatching up all the TV stations, newspapers, hell, even Itchy and Scratchy. And it's trash now, obviously, because Burns is writing it. It's basically propaganda for rich old bald dudes. Burns tries to bribe Lisa with ponies, but she ain't giving up her paper. So what does Burns do next? He shuts off the Simpsons' power, because it's easier to just punish people than actually, make a case. No electricity, no problem. Lisa cranks out the next edition on some ancient mimeograph Principal Skinner had from his Vietnam days. She will never stop. Burns, desperate, drugs Homer trying to get some dirt on Lisa, but it doesn't work. But bonus points for breaking the law, she writes an I give up issue, but Homer, bless his dumbass heart, steps up and starts his own paper. Soon, the whole damn town's making newspapers just to stick it to Burns and really show him how much they hate him. In the end, Burns decides that owning all the media outlets isn't all that great after all. But instead of admitting defeat like a normal person, he goes on a massive shopping spree with Smithers. Rich people stuff. I guess he realized how pointless it is to try and make people love him, and how much more fun it can be when you just come up with creative ways to kill people, like in CEO. So it's Valentine's Day and Bart and Lisa are chilling, watching Itchy and Scratchy like always. Homer is, enthusiastic for time alone with Marge, shall we say. So he tries to bribe them with snacks to stay downstairs so they can get it on. But guess what? Marge is too damn tired and Homer's left sulking, horny, and defeated. Cupid's arrow really missed. He heads out of the house and then sees a billboard for some school offering courses. One of them, stripping for your wife. Seems legit, obviously. Homer's dumb enough to sign up. Dr. Hibbert's running the class, but Homer quickly gets kicked out for hogging the stripping oil. He ends up in this other class, Successmanship 101. And suddenly, Homer's all inspired to start fixing stuff at the power plant, but with less stripping oil. When pissed off, Homer heads home and rants to the family. Then, making enemies of two people? Pretty smart approach, buddy. Then Homer overhears Burns bragging about some next-level shady business. Turns out the Bart convinces Homer to steal the canary, and they send it off to the Canary Islands. Its natural home, obviously. When Burns realizes what's up, he freaks out and, in a panic, names Homer the new owner of the plant. I guess he's really just senile at this point. Honestly, a lot of flaws in the later season Simpsons can be chalked up to everyone being senile. Of course, Homer is like, gotcha sucker, and fires Burns on the spot. No, he's off to Marrakesh to buy opium. Look, I'm not even trying to keep up with the logic of this plot at this point. Homer soon finds out that running the plant is way harder than it looks. He's got no free time. Can't enjoy vacations, can't even hang with his family. Burns wants the plant back. He shows up again, takes him to the cemetery, and is like, look at all these dead people who wasted their lives working. Just like you, Baldy. Homer has a midlife crisis moment and quits. But Burns isn't done. I mean, he hasn't committed any crime yet. So he tries to drug Homer and trap him in a mausoleum. Only Burns is so weak that, by morning, he's only stacked a few bricks, and Homer just casually steps over them like it's nothing. So, less of a crime and more of an inconvenience. Burns gets the plant back, and Homer gets back to meaningful family time by strangling Bart. Okay, so this was another attempted murder that didn't quite work out, but you better believe that Burns has financial fraud down to an art. In a test before trying, he basically causes chaos throughout Springfield by manipulating electricity prices. The episode opens with the news announcing that Mr. Burns is being his usual evil, greedy self. He's about to jack up the price of electricity based only on how much financial experts want to live. Yeah, so murder and artificial inflation. Seems like a legitimate businessman. Burns' crippling raises causes chaos all over Springfield, with everyone having to cut their electricity use down a lot. Even poor Molman ends up dying because of the situation. Not a huge loss, actually. Homer, fed up with the bills, just chucks all his electrical appliances out and finds an old parking meter. His dumbass plan? He sets up parking spaces and starts collecting coins from people to help pay his electricity bill. Actually sounds like a Burns-style plan. Meanwhile, these test proctor guys show up at Springfield Elementary, all serious, telling the kids they gotta take this big-ass standardized test. If they screw it up, the whole school's getting shut down. Of course, the kids completely bomb the test, and absolutely nobody is surprised by that, right? So everyone's about to get shipped off to different schools when Bart shows up. And it turns out this little brat didn't even take the test. Why? Because he was busy playing with a beetle, like that's somehow more important. Homer sets up parking spaces and starts profiting from the people who have to use the meter, securing coins from people and moving the meter from place to place to continue his scam. And he actually makes bank. It's worth the back pain, I guess. Lisa, being the overachiever, snitchy sister that she is, runs to tell the proctor dude Perkins that Bart never took the test. Suddenly, the whole school's future is riding on Bart's score. No pressure, right? But Bart couldn't care less. Then he has this gnarly nightmare where Springfield becomes the dumbest town in America, and finally it starts to click that maybe, just maybe, he should give a crap about this test. Not a sentence I ever thought I would say. Homer starts spending his hard-earned coins on the TV machine at the bus station, only to see on the news that the police are onto his scam and are actively hunting the guy for making $50 on the meter scam. Chief Wiggum eventually catches Homer and is ready to bust him. Homer tries to make a run for it, but being the moron that he is, crashes his car and loses the meter. Marge guilt trips him into returning all the money he stole, so Homer just dumps it into a damn wishing well because if you're gonna lose all your money, you may as well wish for more. So test day comes and Bart, of course, isn't ready at all. He just starts making the same answer for every question, but then he doesn't even finish the last one before time's up, which really doesn't seem like a good idea. But remember that beetle Bart was messing around with earlier? Yeah, it shows up and lands right on the last question, acting like a little bug-shaped answer mark. Somehow Bart passes the damn test, because somehow he has an unthinkable amount of luck.